Hi friends, welcome to the Altenew Exciting Escapades video hop. In today's card, I'm going to be featuring the Sisters of the Heart stamp and die set. This is part of the Adventures Ahead release, that is Altenew's June stamp release. I'm starting off by stamping with VersaFine Clear Nocturne ink. This is a black ink, and I use my anti-static powder on a piece of watercolor paper. I do this to prevent my embossing powder from sticking to areas where I'm not stamping. So I go ahead and use my Misty to stamp out my image, and then I bring in my clear embossing powder and generously coat my image. I tap off the excess and bring in my heat gun, which is already preheated, so it quickly melts the embossing powder, and I have a clean embossed image that's ready to be watercolored. So for watercoloring, I'm using Daniel Smith watercolors and watercolor brushes. I have two round brushes. One is a size 6 and the other is a size 8. The size 6 is my Silver Black Velvet and the 8 is Princeton Heritage. Honestly, you could use any watercolor brushes here. You don't have to specifically have these or any fine brushes for this particular technique. Even a simple watercolor brush or a water brush pen would work perfectly fine. Now I'm swatching out the colors that I picked on the side of the same sheet just to see how they look. I've picked out some really elegant and subtle colors, which is kind of different from the usual bright vibe that I do for my florals. I have a few different shades of blues, including a neutral tint and a shade of green. I start off by painting the flower with just clean, clear water, and then I add the pigment to the inner edges of the petal. I use the second brush with clean clear water to just spread out the ink and just blend it out so it doesn't have really sharp edges. I go ahead to do that for the second flower and I complete coloring the entire image using the same technique. So the idea is to use wet on wet, wherein I use clean clear water for the first layer and then add concentrated pigment to one end of the petal and then just use water to spread it out so it's got this gradient going from dark to light. This is a very quick and easy way of coloring and it does not take a lot of time and it works perfectly when you want to make a quick floral card. Now I will turn on a little bit of music so you can relax and enjoy the rest of the coloring process. Once I'm done with my watercoloring, I rinse my brushes and wipe them clean. I make sure to kind of fluff them and bring them back to their original shape, and then I lay them horizontally until they're completely dry before I store them away. Moving on to the background panel, I have a piece of fog gray cardstock that I die cut using a mini slimline die. I bring in my Altenew fine tool stencil and then fine texture paste. This is actually the opaque matte from Ranger. And I also have a palette knife and a stencil tool ready to work on my background texture element. I position my stencil over the card panel and use some washi tape to secure it in place. I go ahead to take some of that texture paste and apply it generously over the stencil and kind of try to stay towards the left corner. I spread it out towards the right, but make sure not to go all the way to the right. So I want to have a little bit of plain area towards the right. So it's not like I'm covering the whole entire panel using the texture paste. So you can see the stenciling tool or any flat tool will come in really handy to get a really even spreading of that texture paste. You don't necessarily have to have a tool though. An old credit card or an old gift card would work perfectly fine to spread that out. I make sure to kind of even it out and then take off any excess that is left and put it back in my jar. I hate wastage. Now comes my favorite part, the reveal. I love pulling a stencil off and seeing that gorgeous texture coming into action. All right, so I've brought in the die cut florals that I had previously painted, and I also have the dried panel ready now to be assembled. Next, I place everything inside a splatter box and bring in some white gouache to add splatters everywhere. I love my splatters, and today I'm using both white as well as black splatters. I used gouache for white and black sume ink for the black splatters. This is a really intense black ink, and I do love to use it for my splatters. Important tip is to make sure it's completely dry before you go ahead to assemble the cards, so I use that time to work on my sentiment. I stamp the sentiment on a piece of scrap black cardstock and heat emboss over it using white embossing powder. The sentiment I'm using today is from the Line Art stamp set, also from Altenew. Once I'm happy with the sentiment, I trim it down to the size that would work best for my card design. Once I'm happy with that, I go ahead and bring in my foam tape and add it to the back of the sentiment strip and attach it to the card panel. Next, I use foam tape of two different width so I can generously cover the back of my die cut florals, and I position it on the panel so I can get maximum area onto the panel and lose as less as possible when I trim off the excess. I made a mini slimline card base using white cardstock and added my panel to that using foam tape again. A lot of dimension here, and I'm loving the end results. If you liked my card today, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. Have a blessed day.